Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. Those of you who've been with us before know that a revenue culture is when you've maximized your profit after you optimized your people in a low friction revenue context. And the revenue context, which is a lot of what we're talking about today, is so important because all of us know companies that are brilliant. They do great work, they have great products, and they never make any money. And if you optimize your people in a revenue context, they just become great engineers or great programmers or great product developers who know how to transfer value to their customer that their customer wants to buy. So we do this twice a month. We bring you people out there in the real world who are doing this kind of thing. Sometimes we're doing it great and everything's working, and sometimes we're working really hard and we still got a ways to go. And so we get to learn from everybody. And Josh and I have had a lot of fun doing this. And today's a special day for us. We have Wayne Anaka with us. And we've been certifying people in chief revenue officer thinking as chief revenue officers and organizations and teams for 10 years. And in the very first class we ever did, there was Wayne. And Wayne has been with us, I would say, consistently during the time from that first session till today. He's a consistent learner. He is a big time reader. He's a leader that people want to work for, and that he lets them bring their superpower to the game. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about his area of history because it's one most of us don't know much about. He's one of the people that makes air travel safe and helps our luggage get to the other end and helps us have as pleasant a trip as possible, working on ground handling material for airlines. And he's had his own company. He's worked for other people's companies, and he's got some new things going today that I'm sure he's going to tell you about. But with all that, welcome, Wayne.
Great to be here, Rick and Josh. I thank you for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to this session.
Well, terrific. Like I say, 10 years you've been with us, and not only did Wayne come with us, but he brought most of his team at that time. And so we've had the chance to work with him and his team. So we know how he really leads his people, and that's going to be an important part of our conversation today. So, Wayne, let's just start by giving us a little bit of background. And I don't think most of the audience probably is familiar with, the kind of ground handling and the kind of work you've done. So, share a little bit about that.
All right. Well, I grew up as an Air Force brat in Canada, and my parents, they moved a lot being in the Air Force. They tend to want to transfer you from base to base. We worked in the States. We worked in Winnipeg. We worked in Toronto. I've worked in Florida. So my youth, traveling with my parents, allowed me to develop my positive adaptability attitude because it was either adapter or you were in serious trouble with forming friends or whatever else. Both my parents were middle class. So I don't come from a disadvantaged childhood that Richard Branson and some of the others, that became uber successful did. But I came from a loving, middle class background, and my dad was really big into community service. He won the Order of Canada medal, which is equivalent to a being knighted in the UK, or a Medal of Honor in non-military even though he was in the military, but the Order of Canada Medal is equivalent to that for his community service. He
Wow.
helped found and worked with the children with learning disabilities, primarily because my brother had a learning disability and there was no help. Nobody was
Yeah.
was in that field, and you sort of parents had to struggle on their own, with doing that. So being an Air Force brat, I was naturally drawn to aviation, and I worked for two amazing companies for over 50 years in aviation. One of them I worked for, they kicked me out. I went to the second one. They got bought out by somebody else, and I got asked back to the first one again. And then in 2011, I, formed my own consulting company. And I was working on a gig helping a Canadian airline called Air Transat. They were going through a labor dispute, so I was sort of helping organize, what they were doing. And one of the people that was also assisting him had a small ground servicing company himself. And I ended up buying controlling interest of that company, built it up tenfold, and sold it 5 years later. Um, that was quite successful and an enjoyable experience for me. I went then back into refocused on the consulting in aviation safety training that you had mentioned earlier, Rick. And then I took your CRO Thinking Certificate program. Wow, totally blew up my company and where I was headed, and all the work I had done for the last year setting up that company. I blew it up and decided that I had to get into, the science of revenue growth. It just intrigued me so much, and recognizing that I needed that and other companies I knew about and worked with needed that. And so I got into the science of revenue growth. Never gave up on the safety or the environmental aspects of what I was doing, but I had developed training programs for best aviation practices, which I hung on to. And you early on, asked me why I didn't spread my wings. Well, I have recently. Thanks to you. It just took me a little bit longer than you probably had anticipated or hoped for, Rick. But I have now branched, beyond the aviation. But that's where I've been.
So tell us a little bit about where you're branching to beyond the aviation.
All right, I'm going to other transportation companies because there's a commonality there. And I'm still involved in aviation, but more working with airports and MROs, which are maintenance and repair organizations, within the industry, because those areas tend to, well, let me regress and go back. Airlines themselves and the ground handling companies that service them, which was my background, they are very tremendous. It generates tremendous cash flow, and the margins are absolutely razor thin. So they are at a race to the bottom. They are not big in investing in revenue science and optimizing their people, that comes with revenue science. They're interested in the bottom line, and they're more on the mercenary side. So they're less than ideal customer for the revenue science community to deal with. So, but I had the training programs, and there was money to be made in the training programs with the various companies, and so that was good. My problem is I found myself spread across, the sphere of the what's the word I'm looking for
The bell
uh,
curve.
bell curve 2.0. Thank you, Rick. And I was at level 4, a little bit into level 5, which is strictly price driven areas, and that you make money at it. The aviation industry generates reams of cash. The big carriers make billions in profit here, but the margins are very thin, and there is no um, keeping long-term relationship going. Everything is built on price. There that they want to build on the investments of optimizing people and training people. The ownership now of the servicing companies for aviation are owned by venture capitalists. And the venture capitalist model is to buy something, build it up, get a larger market share, and sell it for a profit and move on to the next project. And so when you're going and you're now trying to sell a revenue science project to them, there's customers there, but they're not ideal customers.
Yeah.
Whereas when you when I was doing my dealings with airports are more stable. They're in one location. They, are part of a community. They're beholden to the community. They have roots, and they have to grow with the community. If the community is environmentally friendly and needs to grow that, aviation, which is by necessity because of fuel, and which is 1/3 of their cost structure, is not naturally environmentally friendly.
No.
So airports have gone out of their way to do glycol recovery to keep the stormwater and the waters that surround airports clean from pollution. From that they've done oil water separation, so they get into a lot more of the environmental things that were near and dear to my heart, with the revenue science. And contrary to popular opinion, they're very prosperous. You can make a lot of money in the environmental field, and so you have to look at anything you spend in the environmental field as an investment, not as a cost. Started out as a cost, but it is really an investment. Safety is the other passion, and aviation. Of necessity, aviation was a great customer when it came to safety management because that they can't have airplanes falling out of the sky. So they check, double check, triple check. They build in redundancies to the 10 to the ninth, in redundancies from the safety perspective. And the other field that is very much like that is the healthcare. They build in redundancies to everything they do because you can't afford to make a mistake. All right, a mistake is deadly.
Yeah.
And that most of us, we make a mistake, it costs us a few dollars, and we move on, or we get a bump on the head, and we learn from the dumb stuff and we move on. Well, when you're in aviation and an airplane falls out of the sky, and you lose 180 souls, there's no coming back. So you have to avoid, because there is no compensating after the fact. So that part is near and dear to my heart, and so I've been spending my time, Rick, trying to merge safety and environmental with the revenue growth. All right, and how do those two things complement the revenue science to drive revenues, and drive prosperity, for the people. I'm getting very much into circular economic thinking, both for companies and for the community. but as it applies to companies, most companies are very linear, okay, and they're entrenched in the capitalist system, and it's our purpose is to drive revenue. Well, revenue science is all about driving revenue, and growing profitable revenue, because if you don't do that, you're not there as a business, okay. So that has to be the main focus, and you have to get people focused around that. And the CRO thinking is focused on the sales and the marketing of just a natural progression, that it's focused on the sales and marketing, but the alignment has to be right across all the departments in a company, and so I'm working on projects and which I call revenue engineering, which is the application of revenue science to the other departments. So I'm focused on, what does the finance department look like in a revenue culture organization? What does HR look like in a revenue culture organization? What does operations look like in a revenue culture organization? So those are the three things that are my company's focus. All right. And the sales and marketing is absolutely important, but people like yourself do the sales and marketing part of this way better than I do. Okay. The operational stuff, I'm an expert. I'm a subject matter expert on operations and driving profitable operations. I run budgets. I've run my own company. I've owned my own company. I've run departments. Right. I was a project leader along with the airport authority. My company won the contract for the Toronto Central de-icing facility. So I was there from the first time I was staring at a field with gopher holes in it and little knolls and stuff like that. And my colleague was sitting there telling me to envision 6 de-icing bays, centralized the de-icing. Well, I knew right then why I wasn't an architect, because I wasn't envisioning this. I was seeing a hill with bumps in it. But once I saw the drawings, of the concept that somebody else had imagined far better than myself, I was able to take that concept and say, okay, how do we perfect the team that's going to operate this?
Yeah.
And how do we put that together? So that was my role, was sitting there and saying, what do we need to operate this? What systems do I need to operate this? What type of person needs to operate this? What type of structure needs to operate this? So what's the strategy behind operating a central de-icing facility? And that de-icing facility was $100 million project and generates, close to $40 to $50 million a year, in gross revenues. So, it was a large project. It was a ton of fun, setting that up. Now I do other projects, but I'm focused primarily on small to medium enterprises in the 2 to 50 to $100 million range of companies, because frankly, the large airports like Toronto Pearson or Chicago O'Hare or LAX, those airports have huge engineering firms that they've dealt with for years. And for a smaller company like myself coming in to that airport, even with the revenue science, number one, getting somebody to listen to me becomes hard. If I get somebody to listen to me and I sell them, they've got a huge downside, because they're going to their boss and they're saying, hey, this guy that we've worked with for the last 50 years, I want you to give this little guy a try. And so now you're not only asking somebody to believe in what you're doing, you're asking them to stick their neck on a big chopping block. If you don't deliver what you're selling them. So I figured, but the smaller companies, number one, the bigger guys are so busy that they don't have time to deal with them. And if they do, they're going to charge an arm and a leg, to make it worth their while to separate resources to a smaller, whereas I can come in with smaller engineering, firms and partner up with smaller architectural and engineering firms and go and say, hey, this is what we can do for your airport. So that's why I'm shifting over to the airport side.
Interesting. Interesting. Joshua, you have some questions for Wayne today too.
Yeah, I was making some too as he was sharing some of his story as well. So, one question for you, Wayne. What was your first impression of revenue science? Did you immediately think, this is different, or were you skeptical at first?
I mean, I went into it. Rick gave a presentation at the tech group I belonged to back then, and I was impressed with the revenue science. But when I left that meeting, it was sort of, that was great, but it was the sales and marketing side. So I wasn't totally focused on it. I was more into what can it do for me operationally?
Yeah.
How do I integrate that? Then luckily, Rick reached out to me a couple of years later and said, listen, I'm trying to, get revenue science and build up, revenue science to form a legacy and to improve industry on a much larger scale. With that, are you interested? Well, now I'm back into being a builder. So this is absolutely great stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was at a crossroads because Rick described a company that was doing all the right things and not making any money, which is probably because I never focused on the sales and marketing side, but we won't get into that. So as I was listening to Rick talk, it was stuff was starting to fall into place. And that's why I went and signed up my team. So, I brought 4 other people, through the certification so that the sales and marketing, so we were, number one, the alignment made so much sense because back then we were operating in silos.
Yep.
Sanjay was doing the sales and marketing. Paul was doing the operations. Belorma was doing the operations support and the safety and stuff like that. So everybody was in their silo, and that I was trying to coordinate it all, which was fine, but there wasn't any real crossover. Like Belorma, wasn't going to Paul to coordinate with Paul. Belorma would come to me.
Yep.
I would then go to Paul or to Sanjay or to who could help, and then we would have an overall meeting structure. But this was 3, 4, 5, 6-step process that we were going through. When I'm listening to Rick, I'm going, wow, if they're going to each other this way, when we're sitting in our meeting, we're just talking about revenue because everybody's focused that this is where it is, and the only change I made from Collins is good to great was instead of having the right people, on the bus, I had the right people on the airplane in the right seats. Just as a concession to my background. But yeah, that was what revenue science brought to me. Now, for years, we struggled with explaining CRO thinking to companies. We would go in, we would talk about CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. Well, the first thing is the sales and marketing guy would say, okay, this guy's trying to take my job. Okay, because he wants to be the sales and marketing guy, and the finance guy's going, oh, revenue. He wants to take over my job. And so we were running into opposition that we hadn't anticipated. And you introduced me also, Rick, just as an aside on the anticipation to Mr. Burris, and with his anticipatory thinking and the, following big trends and smaller trends, to help. And he's been amazing. So thank you for that introduction as well. But, so, we weren't doing any of that. And it brought us back into focus. But and Rick was running groups, small group on the CRO thinking to help all of the people that were practicing CROs or trying to apply it to the companies like myself. Rick was having meetings to help explain and help us sell the CRO thinking. And the great part about the CRO thinking and the revenue science is it's evolving.
Yeah.
Like Smart Rev that you wrote, Rick, and the Smart Rev, which is the new name for the CRO thinking, has all of the main tenets that we learned in that very first class.
Yeah.
But all of them have evolved to be so much greater and to integrate technology that was just coming into being 10 years ago when we were doing that. AI was this remote abstract concept that a few nerds were dealing with, and when's that ever going to affect me? Heaven only knows. And now we're sitting there and we're looking at AI and we're going, holy, how do I get more proficient at this? Because it is just an amazing tool for complementing the human element with what we're doing. Okay, I mean it has challenges, but but overall, the tool itself is amazing. How the stuff around it is still needs to be fixed. Number one, there's potential bubble there that the investments that companies are making into it, there's no business plan that's showing a return on the level of investment. So that part can be scary. The technology is great, but how are we handling it around there? And there's also a lot of negative things that you can do with AI as well as the positive things. So the regulation is lagging miles behind, going forward with the AI. But to get back to it, AI is an amazing tool that can complement and supplement, well, not so much supplement, complement the revenue science, and be incorporated into the revenue science as part of the solution. Okay, as one of the technological data tools that you need to scale, because that was one of the other problems is back before the data and the technology, scaling was much more difficult because you had to do all your research by hand. So you started in January with an idea, maybe by the next December you were able to implement part of that idea. Yeah. Now with AI, you start with it, you go and do research and you go through it, and a month later, you're ready to kick off the initial phase of that, and you just saved yourself a year. So it's yeah. So that did that answer your question?
Yep.
Josh,
100%. Another question for you. So for someone just now discovering revenue science, what would be one piece of advice you'd give them?
I would try, and I'm trying to do that with people, is I go into a company and I'm trying to explain to them that you finally are going to be able to get access to a system and to a process that will take the uncertainty out of your revenue growth. And if you could take the uncertainty out of your revenue growth, what value does that add to you?
Yep.
And you put it back to them as wow, if I'm certain that if I follow this path, I can and grow, and I can grow and scale my revenue by X.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Don't,
That'd be a pretty great outcome
don't
for
we wish
anybody.
we had this a long time ago, Rick? You know, and that and then the revenue science, and you introduce them to the smart revenue and introduce them to, the CRO, certification process. They, they learn for themselves, and it's something that can grow and scale. And the great part about it is if you're going to offer, a fractional CRO, to go into a company and to help them develop the CRO, number one, you're training the internal resources how to think, using science as opposed to think just guesswork, and hoping that this marketing campaign works. If you have a science and you're there and you can research, here's where we want to take product A, and we see product A is going to make this part of human life better, and nobody's ready for that yet. You may want to now look at the science and say, okay, let's pivot over here and use this same product and develop it in a fashion that will solve this problem and take the uncertainty out of this problem while people are catching up to get to the bigger problem, which you then can scale into. So by having the science, it gives you the opportunity, to take the guesswork out, but you can scale down, you can scale up with the science, depending on what the buyer is ready for, at that point in time with their product. Like there's no point in asking $100 million company to run a $1 billion ad campaign. It's not going to work.
Yep.
So before they would throw out that that marketing that product because they didn't know a cheaper way to do it. Now that they've got the science, they can go out and sell, with that. And what I find is pretty much every company knows their what.
Yeah.
Okay. People know what they do. Hey, I'm doing this, and unfortunately some don't, but we'll leave that for another conversation. But the majority of companies know their what.
Yep.
Okay. Some of them know their why. They have a vision, they have a purpose, and they know why they want to be doing their what. And they know why they want their what, to sell their what to achieve something else. What's really missing is the how. People have a hard time with the how. They either interpret it, the how is not aligned with the what or the why. Revenue science takes the guesswork out of your how. Because if you apply all of the practices, you answer the 5 questions, you follow your true north, you take the steps, to grow your company, through the 5 steps, and the way of getting there, the science will help you achieve what you want to do, and the pace will be up to you, and you may have to increase it because of what's going on around you. But by and large, revenue science allows you to focus internally to offer value to the customer. And if you're offering value and you can get that message across to your customer, through good marketing, and if you're using the science in your marketing, it is good marketing, then the client is going to thrive in their atmosphere. They're going to become a raving fan. Now you can save money on your marketing. You know, because
Absolutely.
you're getting it by word of mouth that is also scaling.
Yep.
As you've got what you've got is a workforce that is actually paying you for your product. You got a workforce that's selling your product to others.
Yep.
So that's what's so amazing about the revenue science, and why I believe it's so important, to the world and helping the world become a better place. And it needs to be applied, because one of the things with the revenue science that we can't skip over is you have to optimize your people. Well, to optimize your people, you have to look after your people. Your environment for your employees has to be safe. You have to recognize that your employees are your greatest asset. Like, you walk into a company, and especially in the service world, but you walk into a company and you're saying, what's your biggest problem? Oh, our people are just, they're so lazy. They don't do this, they don't do that. These are the people that are on your sales floor in your shop, or these are the people that are facing the customers that are flying for the airline, or these are the people that are loading the baggage on the right airplane. And you're giving them the reputation that they're dumb, they're worthless. How well do you think that's going to work for you?
Huh.
It's not. You've got to treat these people. They have to feel safe in the environment, that they're protected. They have to feel that you've got their back. They have to be compensated properly for what they're doing. You know,
And you have to trust them, or they'll never trust you.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. The trust has to be there, and you have to basically be a servant leader. That they know. That they have to know how much you care before they care how much you know.
Yep.
Okay, and then John Maxwell, I believe was the author of that. I'd like to claim
Yep.
it, but it wasn't mine. But so you have to treat your employee as your greatest asset. And even with AI, your employee is still your greatest asset.
Yep.
You know, and that and your first thing should not be, how do I replace this employee with AI? It's, what can I use this employee to do different that will enhance my operation, because AI can take this workload off of them. Okay, too many are looking at it as a cost saving, and put more money in my own pocket type thinking. You've got to be thinking about how you optimize your employee and say, okay, I've always wanted our guys to do this. We haven't had the time for them to do that. Now with AI taking over, 50% of what they do, they can now focus over here, which is going to take us to the next level and to the next step. And if you're looking after them, it's great. I mean, in Good to Great, I think Collins describes a company called Nucor, and their whole tenet was to look after your employees, and you hire 5 employees, you pay them like 8, and you work them like 10. All right, and they produce for you.
Yep.
Now, along with gaining that productivity, because it's the productivity that's going to drive your revenue. Okay, same as the constraint theory, in the manufacturing side, like here's where you are. Everybody else doesn't need to be working every second of the day, and shouldn't be, but the constraint has to be able to be optimized, where you can maximize your throughput and maximize your productivity. Well, with people, the same thing applies. You want them to, if you maximize their productivity, that's where the money is.
Yeah, when people miss that you're people who can be humble enough to work with others, that's where creativity and innovation and collaboration and teamwork come from, are those people who are not just willing and able, but eager to work with others and see what we can create that's bigger than anything I can do by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. One is definitely too small a number to achieve greatness.
Yeah.
And that everything's about team. I mean, we talk about superpowers in revenue science, and that one of my superpowers is building effective, scalable teams. Okay. That's what I work on. Everything's about collaboration. And yes, I'm big on environment, and yes, I'm big on safety, but that all works from a team perspective. I can think safety is wonderful, but if I haven't got that message down to the shop floor, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
So again, comes back to how do you make that
Well,
happen?
and you've talked about AI quite a bit, and I think a lot of the real teaching of AI is probably the people on the floor doing the work.
Oh, absolutely. Not just AI, the teaching. It's always been that the guy on the shop floor can tell you a better way of doing it because he's done it. He just hasn't bothered to tell anybody above him that he's doing it this way, and he's not reading and following the manual, And what you really want is to make the environment safe enough that he does tell you, so
Yeah.
you make sure that he's not cutting a safety corner that could hurt him or somebody else, and then encourage him to go for it and reward him with financial reward, attaboy reward, whatever it takes. It's not all money. Like money is a great motivator for about 5 minutes, and then you want to know where the rest comes from. When I worked for Ward Air, and I worked with his son, and we were out for beer one night, and he turned around and he says, "What the heck does somebody have to do to get a raise around this place?" And that was the owner's son. Like, and it was just that money only motivates you so far, because you start to live to that new level, and all of a sudden you want to move up to the next level. So it's not, money's not the main motivator. Too little money is a demotivator.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But people want to feel safe. People want to be heard, and people want to be wanted. And if you can give people that satisfaction, they aren't going anywhere.
Yep.
Even if somebody offers them a few more dollars, they're not going anywhere because, hey, I feel safe here.
And fulfilled.
I'm protected.
If I can be safe and fulfilled in a place I trust the leadership, it's really hard to get me out of here.
Oh, absolutely. And you absolutely don't want that person ever to leave you either, because trust me, he's paying you back 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-fold from what you're actually giving him, because he's so motivated, and his biggest terror is letting you down by not doing enough, because he feels safe, motivated, thought of. Employees love to be able to walk into the boss's office and give an opinion and be listened to and heard, even if that is not ever implemented. The fact that you listen to it, you ask questions about it, and you gave them a hearing is just so important to them and their lives. The other is recognize their family.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, one of the things I implemented, in the companies that I worked for was, we would have an annual award. I would save up all of the, 5-year, 10-year, the longevity awards, and I would save them all up, and we threw a big party for all of the employees that reached a milestone in that year, and we invited the wives, and the wives got a corsage. And then you stood up and you praised each recipient was something special they did. That was so motivating for them and their family that even if they wanted to quit, their wife wouldn't let them. You know,
So
so
Wayne, we're about to run out of time here.
no problem.
So here's my final question for you.
Yeah.
As you have been with us in the revenue science work for 10 plus years at this point, what advice do you have for new people coming into business in relation to smart revenue science, that type of thing?
I think I would tell new people, that are coming into the revenue science for the first time is to constantly be looking at how you can apply the science to achieve your vision and your mission, and then the scale. And if you do that and you buy into that revenue science is going to help take you there, the scaling and the increased revenue, and the lower turnover is all going to fall in place. But the first thing is alignment of everybody towards the same goal and applying the science as it best fits in each of your departments, but applying the science that's pointing to one singular goal. You can't have finance be looking to save costs as their goal when marketing is out looking to maximize the number of customers they have, where finance is trying to cut your employees by 10% to save money. Well, you really need to increase your employees because marketing is just sold and the sales department has just sold, double the revenue, and you're going to mess it up if these departments aren't running. So that, I think, is what I would best tell people.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Josh, you have anything you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, just thank you, Wayne. Thank you to our viewers. If you guys haven't seen, we just launched the Revenue Advantage. It's a bi-weekly kind of blog newsletter. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. We'll have it linked. But other than that, that's all I got. And thank you again, Wayne. We really appreciate it. It was a great episode, and I learned a lot about you that I didn't know. So it was amazing for me.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything, Rick?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely did. I hadn't heard your background stories and about your dad and how you got into, the airplane world, and
Yeah.
I found that fascinating.
Excellent.
And
I'm glad I was able to help, and thank you for bringing up the revenue advantage. I read the first episode, and I can't wait for the next one. So it's almost like a favorite series, the Harry Potter of revenue science. It's just tremendous.
well, I want to thank Wayne for being here today. And for our audience, all Wayne's contact information is right there on the screen. And I can tell you, if you're looking for operations that end up creating positive revenue and you're looking for somebody to help you do that, contacting Wayne could be a really good idea. So thank all of you. And if Wayne or Josh or I or anybody in the revenue community can help you, reach out. We'd love to talk. And otherwise, we'll see you in a couple of weeks with the next one.